Hey kids, and welcome to the show. Today we're talking about the soul and what that means. What is a soul? The reason I'm actually talking about this is because the other day I was driving through town in the ice and snow, and I stopped at a gas station and I was talking to the attendant. I'm clicking. And I was talking to the attendant. And she just happened to say, "How do you explain the soul to a 6-year-old?" So here I am. I'm explaining the soul to a 6-year-old. Not really. I'm explaining the soul to you in the way I understand it, with my formal training and my informal training. The soul is one of those wonderful mysteries that people try to explain. They say it's this or they say it's that. There is a history of people wanting to explain the soul, the unexplainable spark of life that is us. Well, what is the soul? Well, let's start by explaining what the soul isn't. The soul isn't something we can touch. It's definitely something that we can feel because we can feel it within ourselves. The soul isn't something we can touch. So we have to describe it, and people want to use words. In the Old Testament, the soul was described in several different ways. It was described as a spirit. It was described as breath. It was the breath of life. You know, God breathed into Adam the breath of life. And those things are illustrations of how God gave us a soul. The soul is unique in that it is some type of energy that we cannot explain. It's really, really intense energy. And the soul, the reason we don't understand it is because no one can see it. And it's something that we try to explain. Remember, it's that breath of life that no one can explain. Later in life, we tried to use science to explain the idea of a soul. And this doctor is crazy. I don't know if you want to call him crazy, but he's kind of doing some stuff this other crazy doctor is doing right now. But we're going to talk about this old doctor, not the new doctor. And you might get the connection. But Dr. Duncan Mcdougall was this doc who wanted to weigh the soul and prove that the soul existed. So he ran these really weird experiments. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. The experiment was in... The experiment's gross. I'm going to talk about the experiment a little bit, but I want you guys to, if you want to learn more about this, it's pretty interesting. Google or research Duncan Mcdougall and the 21-gram experiments. And basically what it boiled down to is during consumption, tuberculosis, there were people that were sick and they knew that they were dying. So he was looking for people that would stay really, really still so he could measure them. And then when they died, when he watched them die, he would weigh them. And he determined that there was a loss of weight at the time of death. And that loss of weight was 21.3 grams. He also did this to dogs. And the dogs were a little easier to control. And he was basically able to kill them and weigh the dogs pre-death and post-death. See where I'm going with this? It's basically doing some nasty stuff to healthy dogs. And when he did that, he proved that there was no weight loss for dogs. There was for humans. Therefore, humans had a 21.3 gram weight to their soul. And when you die, your soul leaves and you lose that weight. Experiments are janky, but he also proved that dogs didn't have souls, according to him. The experiment consisted of 6 patients. 2 of them were thrown out of the experiment because one of them died before they got on the table, and the other one took like 15 minutes to die, so he couldn't determine whether or not the weight was when he died. So it was too long of a period. And the other ones, the weights were off by a lot. But he decided 21.3. Like I said, Google search it, and you'll learn that dogs have no soul. I disagree with that. I believe that something that can look you in the eyes and show you tender love and do all that stuff has to have a soul. So what is a soul? That's a great question. What is a soul? He tried to measure it and weigh it, and that was a bunk experiment, but there's some really cool stuff. What is the soul? So we move forward, and what is the soul? We're moving forward and talking about this, and we want to talk to a 6-year-old or a 5-year-old. We want to talk to our kids about what a soul is, but we don't want to talk about how this doctor in the early 1900s killed a bunch of dogs and watched a bunch of people die. We're going to talk about the soul and on a spiritual level. The church teaches that the soul is this principal part of our body. When I say the church, I say the Catholic Church. It's a principal part of our human experience. And to have a soul is to have a connection with God. Some people believe that only your soul can be in the presence of God. So our meat suits, so to speak, are just temporary, and they house our soul. And we hear a lot of people talking about how our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit. So what does that mean? Obviously, it means that we are supposed to take care of this energy, the soul that's within our bodies that we can't see or comprehend. So I look at my kids and say, you know what a soul is? And sometimes they'll say, well, that's like when you dance really good. Or I saw that movie called Soul. But then when you ask them, well, no, what do you mean by, like, what's a soul? And sometimes the kids will explain it as kind of like being an angel and kind of like being in heaven. So you're kind of just there. And some people describe it as light. Some people describe it as being a ghost. There's a lot of descriptions of what a soul is. And oftentimes it takes us time and meditation and reflection to decide what we even define the soul as being. If you just look up the definition of soul right now, just a definition of soul, you're going to see so many different definitions. So you have to define it within your world. If you are Catholic, when we talk about it as being a principal part of our human body. If you are a Protestant, we talk about, they talk about it in a different way. I'm not going to speak for Protestants. I will never do that. People speak about souls differently. And some people say we don't have souls. It's just energy, and energy leaves our body. I tend to believe that, yes, we are composed of energy, and energy never leaves. We leave this body, and our body hopefully will decompose and be part of the earth again, so that way in the future generations, I could be a plant. That would be really cool. So we want to be plants later on so we can be part of the circle. And when we back up and we look at the natural world, we look at how they build homes, how they interact with each other. As I'm out here on the homestead, I am trying to make sure that I am interacting with nature in the same way that God intended, because the soul is such an abstract. It's so hard to describe. But you can look at nature and you can see how beautiful it is. And when you look at it on a very small, like just really, really small lens, or big lens, macro, right? Micro. If you look at it microscopically and look down, just deep, 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 you're going to see a pattern. And a pattern develops within our cells, and our cells get bigger and bigger. And it's beautiful that our natural world, every animal, everything is just interconnected. And how could that be interconnected without a common source of energy? And that common source of energy, I think, is the soul. And the soul can exist in basically in every living thing, because through God's creation and through his breath, all things are beautiful. The problem that we have is that when we commit sin and we treat people bad, or we destroy our bodies and we treat our bodies poorly, our vessel that contains our soul stops looking beautiful. And it's because we are hiding or not realizing that the entire source of everything we are cannot even be touched. We can say your memories are in your brain, but nobody knows that for sure. They just know that there's things popping and stuff up there. But what keeps everything popping? That's the soul. Your brain pops a lot. Some pop better than others. Some are like popcorn, and some of them are just going through life. So what's a soul? The soul is that part about you that is unlike anyone else. Unlike any of God's creations, it is uniquely you. Call it your personality, call it your ambitions, call it your connection to God. Your soul is 100% you without any of the walls or the mask or the pretending to be something you're not, because in the end, your body will be left here to be part of this beautiful place that we call Earth, and your soul, or that energy that is you, will go somewhere else. I think it goes to heaven, to be with God until He's ready for us to do something different. Some people think that energy just goes into nature. Newton says for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Third law of motion. When you die, there has to be an equal and opposite reaction. But think about it this way. When you die, all that energy, rather than just kind of being the same as the energy on Earth, what if it's a nuclear reaction and that energy becomes something so much bigger and so much greater and something that we can never imagine in these little meat suits? Because it takes our soul to reunite with God, to explode with this love and this desire to just be loved and to love. It's a lot of love. So what is the soul? Well, in this dad's opinion, the soul is God's way of allowing us to share His love with others. Hey, before you take off, since you made it through the video, I would really appreciate it if you head down to that little like and description bar, hit the like, hit the dislike, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, do all that stuff, because more than anything, when you interact with this channel, it helps us be shown in front of other people. So if you appreciate what I'm saying, man, there's nothing better you can do than to just share this content. And if you have a few bucks and you want some great coffee, head down to the description and get some Scars and Stripes coffee. Empower veterans every day. #United We Brew. So until next time, work hard, be kind, and have fun.